Good morning. We're back. We're on chapter 31 of Malcolm at Midnight, which is the last chapter. It is called Dwell Here, and the word dwell means live. Malcolm was so startled by the voice, he tripped on the window ledge and fell into the room. He was on top of a bookshelf where he tangled with a model skeleton before crashing to the floor of the library. A circle of critters surrounded Malcolm, but Malcolm stared at only one of them. "Aggie," Malcolm gasped. "You're here. You're better." Aggie bowed her head. Her scales had gained some luster since Malcolm had last seen her. "Yes, alive and improving, thanks to you." Billy burst through and then flung her paws around Malcolm's neck. "Malcolm, you're alive. I'm so glad. We're so glad." Ouch! Something under Malcolm ground into his hind leg, but he was too happy to care. Harriet the hedgehog sniffed. "We were trying to have an academy meeting, our first since Aggie was recovered and the school was flooded, and then you fell in." Everyone looked up at the broken window. Malcolm shifted, and the chalky white stone rolled out from under him. The academy all stared at it. Malcolm looked around, almost too afraid to ask. Did you all?" "We heard, Malcolm," Jessie said. "We did. We all heard Clyde." Tink the turtle nudged him. "We thought it was you. HB had seen a rat. We never knew Clyde was still around." "Beep, beep, beep," the three chicks interrupted. Pete tucked his pincher in his shell and smiled sheepishly at the birds. Perhaps you did try to tell us." "Hey, there's a new word," Jessie hooted. He high-fived each of them. Malcolm continued. "Clyde said he was in the academy once." Aggie nodded. "Clyde's is a long story, but it's why some found it so hard to trust a rat. He was Honey Bunny's pledge." She cleared her throat. "And Honey Bunny doesn't like to make mistakes." At those words, Malcolm's throat gummed up. "I made a mistake about Honey Bunny. I thought he was the one working with Snip." He swallowed but pressed on. It was important to get it all out. "I was so sure it was Honey Bunny that I didn't consider anyone else." Silence settled on the group. Then, from behind Harriet, someone cleared his throat. "I think I said to not call me that." Malcolm's eyes bugged out. How could it be? But yes, alive and scowling, with his ear bandaged and his back leg in a cast, a pink one, Honey Bunny. "You're alive? But how?" Honey Bunny shrugged. "The tent's in the courtyard." Malcolm's mouth opened, but nothing came out. "What do you say to someone you thought you had killed, but then ended up not?" Honey Bunny cuffed him lightly. "Look, don't worry about it, Runt. You were doing what you thought was right. No less than me. And if it weren't for you, well, who knows what Snip would have done?" The rest of the group pressed in. "Yes," said Harriet. "Aggie, we're going to reinstate him, aren't we?" The rest of the group murmured in agreement. Malcolm cleared his throat to interrupt. "Thank you, everyone, but please, wait. I don't want to lie anymore. No more secrets. I did talk to another, actually two now, and I'm going to do it again." Malcolm pulled his tail out so everyone could see the ring. "I need to give this back to Malinky." Honey Bunny sighed. He hobbled closer. "Malcolm, I think I gave you the wrong impression. Helping nutters and lankies is what we do. Yes, talking to them is unconventional, but I think I need to say that I've been unfair. I couldn't see beyond the fact that you were a rat." He blew a gust of air. "I'm sorry. If you need to talk to a lanky to make things right, then we owe you that much. By Claw, I'd walk you there myself if it weren't for this busted-up leg." Malcolm felt a warm glow growing in his chest. "Thank you, honey. HB." He ducked his head down. "So it's settled. You'll return to the academy after you return the ring," Aggie said briskly. She certainly was back to herself. "Well, do we all agree that Malcolm here shall be considered a full member? I think his pledge time is more than over." Malcolm looked from Critterface to Critterface. Harriet sniffed but didn't say anything. But something was still bothering Malcolm. Yes, he wanted to be back with the academy, with McKenna School, with the Nutters, but maybe the critters didn't know. "Aggie, I'd love to join you, but I can't go back to room 11. I'd bid a Nutter." From the front desk, a splashing noise started up. "Oscar!" Billy cried. She darted up to the aquarium, where Oscar shifted and rearranged the beads and letters. Billy read aloud, "Welcome back, not a rat. R423. A nice picture of all of them. R423? Jessie repeated. Octavius shrugged. But Malcolm knew what Oscar meant. He moved to the bookshelves. R423. Malcolm stopped in front of a giant dictionary on a bottom shelf. It was as big as 6 social studies textbooks stacked together. It was almost as big as Malcolm's super deluxe cage back in room 11. Malcolm sniffed it. He pawed at it. And then he saw it. On the spine of the book, a mark. The Midnight Academy had followed Malcolm to the book. Aggie sucked in her breath. That's an old one. We don't even use it anymore. It means dwell here. She looked around at the group and everyone shook their heads. How long had this been marked? Why? Who else had lived here? Malcolm squeezed around to the back of the shelf and found that the book was hollowed out. He could dwell here. He could stay snug as a rat in a really big dictionary. And by night, he'd come out to serve the academy. Aggie said, Octavius, we'll need to record all this. Malcolm, you weren't in the academy long enough to know, but we keep minutes of all adventures and transactions. You'll need to start meeting with Octavius. Malcolm poked his head out from his new dictionary dwelling. It had given him an idea. Aggie, would it be okay? Well, Amelia, my nutter, she and I kind of have a system, and she's a really fast typist. Maybe if I told the story to her, she could write it down? The other critters fell silent. It was Honey Bunny who spoke up. I think that's a grand idea. That frees up Octavius here, because we still have a lot of loose ends to wrap up. There's been no sign of Snip since yesterday night, but we're not sure what that means. And I'd like to talk to that owl. From a respectable distance, mind you, to see what he did with that scoundrel Clyde. Maybe he'd like to join us. We could use some reconnaissance on the side. Honey Bunny blathered on, but Malcolm's ears drooped. Gristle, he was tired again, and the niche was so cozy. Someone had filled it with rags. They didn't smell quite as nice as Amelia's strawberry shampoo, but they'd do. Malcolm wiggled in. The murmur of the academy filled the room as Malcolm folded his ears down and pulled his tail around him. The ring was still there. It'd be okay for a little while longer. A nap, then Malcolm would put the ring on your desk, Mr. Binney, and then maybe a snack. Malcolm wondered if Jessie or Billy would be up for a nosh and fodder later on, or maybe he'd take them down to play in the boiler room. But before he could even ask, Malcolm drifted off to sleep, and we all know what that meant. Being the rat you are, a rat of valor and merit, is really very exhausting. Or maybe it meant that Malcolm the rat was finally home. And there's one more part that I'd like to read. It's called the Epilogue. An epilogue is something that authors put at the end of a chapter book to give the reader a little bit more information. So it says Epilogue, or Thought You Might Want to Know. Dear readers, it should be noted that this story, Malcolm's story, isn't completely done, even though the writers have finished writing it. No, there's one last part you should know about. One day in winter, not long after Mr. Binney read Malcolm's story, the 5th graders of room 11 came into the classroom to find their teacher sitting on his stool as usual at the front of the room. On one side of him sat Miss Brumble, with a dazzling midnight blue ring on her finger. On the other side was Malcolm's old 3-story cage, with drip-free antibacterial water bottle, fleece-lined comfy cube, tail-safe wheel, and all. Mr. Binney grinned. Come on in, everybody. I'd like to introduce you to our new classroom pet. He reached his hand in the cage, scooped out a critter, and placed him on his shoulder. Malcolm. Meet Malcolm the rat. But Mr. Binney, that's the same Mr. Binney carefully cleared his throat. No, Kira, he said firmly. Can't you tell? This is clearly a rat, not a mouse. Look at his magnificent tail, his whiskers, his intelligent coffee-black eyes. Clearly a rat. A rat of some valor and merit, in fact. Right, Amelia? Jovan? Amelia and Jovan, who were sitting next to each other, grinned back. Right, said Amelia. But, Kira started. Jovan elbowed her gently. He's definitely a rat, Kira. Furthermore, I have a new read-aloud for us, Mr. Binney said, moving on. Mr. Binney had learned in all his years of teaching that sometimes what works best with students like Kira is to just keep going. The class drew up their chairs. It wasn't really read-aloud time, first thing in the morning, but no one was going to argue with Mr. Binney. Ever since the morning he had found that ring on his desk, he had been different, and any numbbrain would take the read-aloud over the usual daily math warm-up. Today, said Mr. Binney, I'm going to read you one of my favorite stories. Any idea what it is? He reached behind him and pulled out a stack of papers. It's a story about a rat hero. It's called Malcolm at Midnight. And that, readers, is the real end of the story. Thought you might want to know. It turns out that a lot happens in a school even if the teachers are looking. Sincerely, Mr. Mark Binney, 5th grade teacher. And that's the end. We finished. Oh, I love this book. One of my probably top 5 chapter books. I hope you enjoyed it too. I'm sad that we're not together to finish it, but at least we're still able to read together for a bit. There is a second Malcolm book, Malcolm Under the Stars, I believe. I read it last year with my students, but I still think that the first chapter book is better. And the second one is very long and takes a long time to read. So I'll do some thinking on what our next chapter book is, and then I'll start tomorrow. Okay? I did say I was going to have you vote, but I'm not sure how many chapter books I actually have here at home, so it's going to depend on that. All right? Have a great day. Bye, 3rd graders.